Good afternoon, I'm Mike Amor. It's 4 o'clock in Melbourne and these are our top stories. Breaking news on a COVID outbreak at the Royal Children's Hospital as Victoria suffers its deadliest day of the third wave. Also school fears. Students become infected on the first day back in classrooms. Daniel Andrews refuses to confirm if he's being investigated in a corruption probe. Rogue Porsche driver Richard Pusey claims to have PTSD as he fights for bail. And why a whistleblower says Facebook is the new big tobacco.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Mike Amor.
First at 4, we begin with breaking news. A cancer ward at the Royal Children's Hospital has just been declared a Tier 1 exposure site. All children and one parent must now go into lockdown inside the hospital for 2 weeks and aren't allowed to leave at any time. It's unclear if the positive case was a worker, patient or visitor, or the date of the exposure. We're standing by to bring you the latest from the hospital in a news conference just ahead. It's another setback on Victoria's deadliest day of our third wave. 11 Melburnians succumbed to the virus and more than 1,400 new cases were recorded. There's growing pressure on our hospital system with more than 14,000 active cases across the state. But the government is looking ahead to life beyond lockdown, revealing plans for rapid testing in health and other high-risk workplaces. Here's Georgia Comensoli.
Victoria has just hit a week of recording more than 1,000 cases a day, and sadly overnight 11 Victorians have lost their lives to COVID. 1,420 new cases recorded in the last 24 hours. There's 525 COVID patients in hospital. Our health system is starting to struggle under the increasing demand. Peak bodies now declaring hospital staff are often missing meals and breaks to battle understaffing. The government announced today 2 million rapid antigen tests will soon be rolled out across the health system, with hopes of bringing them into other environments, including schools, correctional facilities and childcare.
It will be part of the staff surveillance program. It will be used to manage close contacts. It will be used to triage patients.
What rapid antigen testing offers us is an additional tool, and particularly to enable individuals and workplaces to bring testing closer to people.
And for Victorians wishing to come home from New South Wales and the ACT, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. New rules mean if coming from an orange zone, residents only need to test on their return and isolate until they get a result back.
Victorian residents can return through an online application. They will need to test and home quarantine for 14 days.
Meanwhile, the City of Melbourne has revealed strict new vaccination rules for when the city opens up. All contractors and council staff will need to be double-dose vaccinated by November. As for our vaccination rates, 83.8% of eligible Victorians have had at least one dose of a vaccine. As for double dose, we're sitting at 54%. Mike?
Georgia, thank you. It's been a rocky return to school for Year 12s at 4 secondary colleges in Melbourne's north and west. They've each had a student test positive after sitting yesterday's GAT, forcing classmates into isolation. Paul Dowsley has more.
85,000 Year 12 students sat the VCE General Assessment Test yesterday, and among that large group were 4 students who had COVID, and as a result 4 schools are closed across Melbourne's north and west. They are Glenroy College, Ruthven Secondary College in Reservoir, Roxburgh College in Roxburgh Park and Point Cook Secondary College.
It's a regret, and I'm sure it's a big blow for those 4 young people and their families.
Last Friday, the Health Department strongly urged students in 22 hotspot postcodes to be COVID tested before the exam, and about 8,000 took that advice and were given priority at testing stations. Of them, 33 tested positive, so they stayed home, each being granted an exemption to sit the exam another time. And now we've learned that 4 who did sit the test have COVID, and with so much of it swirling around, we are approaching 15,000 active cases. It's going to become an issue for schools as more students return to the classroom in the weeks ahead. There will be a new way that they will respond to positive cases on campus by isolating groups of students rather than sending whole schools back to home learning, and some of that will come down to who has been vaccinated.
It's never a risk-free environment, and it just won't be. Even when we get to 70% double dosed, 80% double dosed.
Today we saw some of the ventilation options being installed into all schools. 51,000 air purifiers are being installed in classrooms. The priority first will be hotspot areas in Melbourne's north and west. It's not yet clear when students will be able to return to the 4 affected schools. Each of them needs to be deep cleaned.
The Premier has hit back at claims he's facing a corruption probe. As Charnel Vella reports, the allegations relate to the fight over major changes to the state's fire services.
Premier Daniel Andrews arrived at Parliament this morning and firmly refused to answer questions around if he's being investigated by IBAC over his involvement in deals with the United Firefighters Union.
If you want to know what's going on at IBAC and who they're talking to and what they're talking to them about, then you should go and have a chat to IBAC. I'm not in a position, even with kind of round the back door questions like that, to be providing any other answer.
The claims come after a 2016 workplace agreement battle between the United Firefighters Union and the CFA, which ended with the resignation of then Emergency Services Minister Jane Garrett. IBAC has been investigating what transpired since 2019. The opposition says although they have no confirmation that IBAC is looking at the Premier directly, he should stand down given New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian resigned over a confirmed ICAC investigation last week.
The Premier in New South Wales has just stood down for being investigated by a corruption commission. Now he's being investigated and he refuses to stand down. I hope that tells the whole of the state of Victoria about the strength of his integrity compared to what he expects of others.
But legal experts say the Premier shouldn't have to, even if IBAC does confirm that he's being looked at. Right now, a spokesperson for the watchdog would only say, as a matter of practice, IBAC does not comment on whether it has a complaint or investigation before it. Questions around IBAC won't disappear anytime soon for the state government. Next week, a probe into branch stacking and former Minister Adam Somyurek will begin.
Former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has emerged for the first time since her shock resignation.
I just want to say again a big thank you to everybody. It's been an enormous comfort to know people care.
Miss Berejiklian returned to work at her electorate office, which has been inundated with flowers and cards. And the Nationals have elected Paul Toole as the new leader of their party. The new Deputy Premier won the vote in a landslide. The Porsche driver involved in the Eastern Freeway tragedy claims he needs help to treat PTSD he got during the incident. Melina Saris has the details and Richard Pusey is fighting for bail.
Mike, earlier today, Pusey's barrister told a court his client needs ongoing treatment after witnessing the carnage on the Eastern Freeway, which killed 4 police officers. Pusey wasn't injured when a truck veered into the emergency lane and struck the officers. He'd been pulled over for speeding moments before. He filmed the police members as they died and taunted them as he walked around that scene. His lawyer says Pusey was a bystander who was immediately placed in custody after that crash and went untreated for post-traumatic stress disorder. The 42-year-old appeared briefly over video link from jail. He was arrested on stalking charges 3 weeks after being released from prison. Pusey will be back in court next week, Mike.
Mel, thank you. The so-called Facebook whistleblower has accused her old employer of moral bankruptcy in a highly charged appearance before a US Senate committee. She claims the social media company deceives users and spreads extreme messages. Here's US correspondent Tim Lester.
It's the David and Goliath battle shaking the world's biggest social media company. Facebook versus ex-employee Frances Haugen. This morning, US senators applauded the latter as they questioned her in a hearing on Capitol Hill.
Facebook is stuck in a feedback loop that they cannot get out of.
37, Harvard-educated, a data specialist. In May, Frances Haugen not only quit Facebook, she took with her thousands of internal documents.
They have been hiding this information because they feel trapped, right?
Evidence suggesting the company only tackles a tiny fraction of violent posts, as well how posts on Facebook's Instagram increase body image fears among teenage girls. Problems she claims Facebook won't address because it wants to protect profits.
And that's what moral bankruptcy is.
And big tech now faces that big tobacco jaw-dropping moment of truth.
The committee chair taking to task Facebook's founder and CEO for posting this sailing video as the fuss around his company unfolded.
Mark Zuckerberg ought to be looking at himself in the mirror.
Mark holds a very unique role in the tech industry in that he holds over 55% of all the voting shares for Facebook. There are no similarly powerful companies that are as unilaterally controlled. And in the end, the buck stops with Mark.
The CEO had another Facebook trauma on his mind today, apologising for yesterday's global 6-hour outage. Facebook services now back from darkness as whistleblower revelations explode around the company.
Up next, new details on the COVID exposure on the cancer ward at the Royal Children's Hospital. Plus, arson attack, a COVID patient's car set alight in a small town. And Russia wins the latest space race, sending a film crew into orbit. Back soon, here on 7 and 7+. Taking a live look at Melbourne this afternoon here on 7 News. After our sunny day, cloud is building. It's 21 degrees outside right now. Jane Bunn will be here with the forecast later in the hour. Returning to our breaking news now, and the Royal Children's Hospital Cancer Ward has just been declared a Tier 1 exposure site, with all patients and one parent going into lockdown for 2 weeks. It's been revealed that the case that sparked the scare is a parent and has only just tested positive. Let's take a listen to the news conference that happened just moments ago.
Our aim is to keep everyone safe. We do have exposure sites. We have been dealing with them for quite some time, and sadly we will continue to deal with them as we go into the future and as the number of COVID positive people in the community increases. So we're really committed to the care of our children and finding that balance so that they have mum or dad with them, but that does allow exposure sites to happen, and that's what's happened in this case. We've got very clear screening processes in place, but sometimes mum and dad have been in and then become COVID positive a few days later. We're very, very happy and glad that we've got lots and lots of single rooms so we can isolate people quite safely when we do get a positive COVID result. We do know that COVID in children is not as extreme as it does affect adults in that way, so we're happy with that. But all our children, no matter where they are monitored very closely, whether they've got COVID or not.
And of course, we'll have much more on that breaking story coming up in 7 News tonight at 6. A COVID positive woman from Victoria has been targeted in South Australia. The mother of four's car was torched just days after her infection resulted in new restrictions being imposed. None of the family was home at the time of the suspected arson attack in Mount Gambier. Russia has become the first country to send an actor and film director into space. Yulia Peresild is playing a heart surgeon sent to the International Space Station on a life-saving mission. The actress and director will be on board the space station for 12 days. It means Russia has beaten Hollywood and Tom Cruise to the idea of shooting a movie in space. Sport is coming up after the break with all the latest trade developments in the AFL. Also, the Ashes back on as England captain Joe Root gives the green light. And later, how pets will soon be reunited with their owners. Faster. You're watching 7 News live from Melbourne. Tom Brown is here with sport. And Tom, another interesting day in the AFL.
It's heating up, Mike. Plenty of action on day 3 of the trade period and a few deals have just gone through. Mitch Cleary is across all the movements this afternoon. Mitch, the Premiers have landed their first trade blow.
Tom, as revealed on 7 News last night, Luke Dunstan has officially moved to the Melbourne Footy Club on a 2-year deal as a delisted free agent. The Saints get nothing in return for his move, but he did poll 11 votes in the Brownlow medal, so he comes in as ready-made midfield replacement. Deal in the works going on at the moment involves 4 clubs: Melbourne, St Kilda, Western Bulldogs and Adelaide. A range of pick swaps. Essentially, it means Jordan Dawson's move from Sydney to Adelaide will be slowed up. That pick 17 that had been hope to be part of that deal will ultimately end up in Melbourne's hands. Meantime, Jordan Clark and his move from Geelong to Fremantle. He's hoping to get to the Dockers on a 4-year deal. They're still in conversations right now, the Cats and the Dockers. List boss Stephen Wells spoke on radio this morning.
Jordan understands that he's a contracted player, and it'd have to be a good deal for us to let him go, but that's all being worked through at the moment. There would have been an understanding that if pick 8 came our way, that something else would go with Jordan.
Sticking with the Cats, a big coup for that footy club this morning. Eddie Betts signing on as a development coach. Had been playing at Carlton, retired this year. Joins old mate Paddy Dangerfield in the hoops down at the Cats. And Tom, a big move of the day has been traded. Jeremy Finlayson from Greater Western Sydney to Port Adelaide in exchange for a future third-round pick. He joins Ken Hinckley's team as a backup forward, but the coach will be hoping he can get the most out of the inconsistent performer in Teal next season. Tom?
Thanks to Mitch Cleary. We'll have more trade news building in our bulletin shortly at 6 o'clock. Meantime, this summer's Ashes have been saved after crisis talks between the Australian and English cricket boards. Captain Joe Root had reportedly agreed to lead a near full-strength squad on the tour down under. Quarantine and living conditions for players and families had been the sticking point. The deal is expected to be signed off this week.
Having families around, especially in a pandemic, guys are on the road for a lot longer than what tours used to go when you're adding on quarantine at the start and potentially at the end, depending where you're coming and going. So, I sympathise fully with them.
It's exciting. The first test begins at the Gabba. Is due to begin at the Gabba on the 8th of December. He was overlooked for the T20 World Cup, but Nathan Coulter-Nile has issued a timely reminder to Aussie selectors with a man-of-the-match performance for Mumbai in the IPL. The 33-year-old tore through Rajasthan's lineup, taking 4 for 14.
Another one hits the stumps. It's been the target so far today here at Sharjah.
Coulter-Nile's performance powered Mumbai to an 8-wicket victory. And quarantine has proved too big a pit stop for Scott McLaughlin to fly home from the USA for the Bathurst 1000. Rookie of the Year in his debut IndyCar season, the 2019 winner feels a fortnight in quarantine would not give him enough time to be ready for the great race on the 5th of December.
I'm not prepared to come back to Australia and do it half-assed, I in terms of, going to the racetrack and doing a seat fit there or practicing my first driver changes.
He's a perfectionist. Kiwi-born McLaughlin hasn't seen his parents in New Zealand in over 2 years. Mike, just back from the airport, Pat Lipinski is due to join Collingwood from the Bulldogs. We'll introduce you to Pat, get a better idea of him. I've just spoken to him one-on-one out at the airport. He's back from his break and ready to hopefully get traded to Collingwood. We'll hear from him at 6 o'clock.
OK, thanks, Tom. New laws will help lost pets and their owners be reunited faster. The proposed changes will allow cats and dogs to be taken to participating vets or animal shelters rather than relying on councils. It's expected to improve welfare for pets by reducing the amount of time they spend away from home. The changes are expected to begin next October. Up next, the latest on a COVID outbreak on the cancer ward at the Royal Children's Hospital on the deadliest day in Victoria's third wave. Plus, IVF treatments dramatically cut back over hospital pressure. Fears of new school outbreaks after COVID-positive students sat the GAT exam. And a new crackdown on home loans, what buyers need to know. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
Live from Melbourne. This is 7's Afternoon News with Mike Amor.
Let's get more on our top story now. The cancer ward at the Royal Children's Hospital has just been declared a Tier 1 exposure site, with all children and one parent going into strict isolation for 14 days. Estelle Griepink is there for us. And Estelle, a parent who'd been visiting their sick child has just tested positive.
Good afternoon, Mike. Yes, that's right. The Chief Executive Officer of the hospital, Bernadette McDonald, has just spoken with the media and confirmed that the Kookaburra ward is now an exposure site. So parents who had visited as well as children have now been told to isolate. We are waiting for details of just when this exposure occurred. We have been told it was a few days ago, but for now there have been no new cases to come of it so far. Contact tracing is still underway. Now, when speaking to the media, the Chief Executive also said it is a delicate balance trying to find a way to have parents visit their kids in the ward and also keep COVID out. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
We're really committed to the care of our children and finding that balance so that they have mum or dad with them, but that does allow exposure sites to happen, and that's what's happened in this case.
And Mike, the hospital is currently treating 12 children with coronavirus, but none of them are linked to this new exposure. As the hospital says, it is inevitable in some cases that coronavirus will get to the hospital. It is all about getting vaccinated to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Mike?
Estelle, thank you. There are fears of new school outbreaks in Melbourne's north and west after it was revealed 4 cases have now been linked to yesterday's GAT assessment. The students are from Glenroy, Roxburgh, William Ruthven and Point Cook secondary colleges. 30 cases were caught by testing prior to the assessment. For more now, let's bring in education expert Simon Dewar. Simon, were you expecting this?
Look, Mike, it's not a huge surprise. I really feel for the families involved, for the students involved and for the schools involved. But when we look at the number of cases that we have in the community at the moment, and then we attempt to bring back 85,000 students to complete the GAT, I'm sure that this was part of the planning and the concern that we all had on our minds. So the positive that we can take out of it is that the schools have done an amazing job to be able to respond to the challenges that were placed in front of them. We know their protocols around being COVID safe were exceptionally good. They've been informing families of what's been happening. And then we combine that with some of the other strategies around the pre-testing for the 8,000 students that picked up 30. So I'm sure that it is, not a huge surprise. And I feel that part of the response has been, for me, the impressive part that we've got to take forward.
And just picking up on that, Simon, what is the current procedure to ensure those infected students aren't allowed contact with others?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that the schools are working really close with health authorities. They're making sure, one, that the students certainly that have been in the vicinity of that, the infected students have been made aware that they are isolating and stopping further spread. But we combine that with some of the other strategies, the strategies around recommending the vaccinations take place for our Year 12s. And we know right now that we've got somewhere up around 95% of our students. The masks and the importance of that, maybe it's something we have to explore for all students as we progress to some sort of COVID normal schooling. We've also heard of the rapid antigen testing and the importance of that and how that could also be another layer of support for schools as we progressively bring back students year level by year level.
Yeah, it's likely, isn't it, that more students will be forced to isolate during their exams. What can they do?
Yeah, so schools will do a great job in supporting the students that have been identified as either one, testing positive, or 2 as a close contact. We've seen the amazing job that schools have been doing over the last 18 months, the way that they've supported students to pivot from face-to-face learning into the remote space. And I'm sure that's something that they'll be able to adapt to and continue with over the course of the next few months. There will be challenges that keep presenting at different times. And what we know is that, and what we need to do is just keep trusting our schools. They're doing an amazing job, and I have full faith that they'll continue to do that as we move forward. They'll make sure that no student falls through the cracks, that no student's just left to isolate without having good support by their schools. I know that's one thing for sure that schools will really focus on.
Education expert Simon Dewar, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Today is the deadliest day in the state's 3rd COVID wave, with 11 Victorians dying with the disease and 1,420 new cases. Advisor to the World Health Organisation, Professor Mary Louise McLaws, joins us now. Always great to see you, Professor. With more than 1,400 new cases today, how is our outbreak looking, do you think?
Good afternoon, Mike. Look, it is a concern. You were a couple of weeks behind New South Wales, and now sadly, the outbreak has caught up in its pattern, and hopefully it will start to decline, particularly if the vaccine rate starts to improve. At the moment, you've only got 28% of the 16 to 39-year-olds fully vaccinated, and yesterday 45% are committed to their first dose. So once that starts to get up and higher, then you may start to see the numbers decline. But you have about 3 areas that are of concern, and that's the eastern, the southern, and the inner south east area. They've increased in number, and regionally it has increased with a 5-day rolling average of about between 9 and 10%. So we haven't yet seen, or you haven't yet seen, a stabilisation of the case numbers yet.
We always see, unfortunately, the number of deaths lag behind the case numbers. We're seeing that in New South Wales. 11 deaths here today. Is that likely to get even worse, do you think?
Oh, look, the deaths per case is quite concerning. You know, in New South Wales, it started at about 3, and then it ramped up dramatically, and it is very high. At the beginning of any outbreak, usually the very vulnerable die first because they seem to be picked on by the virus first. But what has happened is we're now seeing, because Delta is now persistent, that the death rate is sadly higher than we ever expected with non-Delta. So sadly, while we still have a lot of a circulating virus, you will still see a lot of deaths, and it's very concerning for Australians. We haven't been used to this, and it's very, very difficult to cope with.
Yes, it is. We've had just news breaking of an outbreak in Royal Children's Hospital. I don't expect you to know about that outbreak, but you've been telling us about the importance of rapid testing for months now. Would rapid testing have protected the hospital better? In no way we're blaming the hospital or the parent.
No, I understand that all governments across the board, regardless of whether they're state or federal, have been very slow to take up the new science. I have heard that New South Wales has been trialling rapid antigen testing, and in places like the corrective services, banks in the hotspot areas, railways, etc., and they've worked very well identifying staff before they go onto their work shift as positive and removing them immediately. And it's the sort of thing that could happen and used very well in places like children's hospitals for all visits, cancer wards, for example. So yes, it should be used, particularly given that Victoria is a hotspot at the moment, and all, even double vaccinated at the moment, because not everybody has reached that 2 weeks post that second dose where they get their best immune response and therefore their best likelihood of not getting symptomatic infection or even asymptomatic infection and passing it on to very vulnerable patients. So they should all be having rapid antigen testing at the front door before they go in.
Yeah, you have been telling us that for months. Professor Mary Louise McLaws, appreciate your time.
Take care, stay safe.
It's just got even tougher for Melburnians trying to buy a new home. Changes by the banking regulator could reduce the amount they can borrow. Gemma Acton reports.
Good afternoon. The banking regulator APRA has made its first move to rein in home loan lending, with a change it says means a typical buyer would be able to borrow around 5% less than the current maximum amount. According to analysis from Rate City, that would work out at around $28,500 less for a single borrower on the average income and around $35,000 less for a family.
APRA has decided to move swiftly to limit the amount people can borrow. They're concerned about the risk in the property market and they're acting fast.
APRA has asked banks to raise the serviceability buffer from 2.5% to 3% for new home loan applicants. This buffer is used by lenders to test whether borrowers would be able to keep servicing their mortgage payments if there was a rise in interest rates. The move is also expected to impact investors who often take out loans with higher mortgage rates than owner-occupiers.
What we do know is, yes, rates are at record lows now, but they will rise. It's just a matter of time.
APRA has said it anticipates the change will have only a fairly modest impact on overall credit growth, and many analysts believe it will make very little difference to the red-hot housing market. Given that, several banking analysts expect that APRA will follow up with further measures to tighten lending before long.
Unvaccinated people will soon be banned from Town Hall and the State Library. Up next, Lord Mayor Sally Capp explains the strict new rules for when the city reopens. And a police officer pleads for help as his young son faces a grave health fight. Back soon from our Docklands studios, right here on 7. The City of Melbourne is the latest organisation mandating COVID vaccinations for its staff. Council employees and contractors will be required to be fully vaccinated from November 5. The rules also apply to members of the public visiting buildings like Town Hall and council facilities. Lord Mayor Sally Capp is at Town Hall this afternoon. Sally, great to see you. Do you have any indication of what proportion of your workforce will get vaccinated?
Hello, Mike. And yes, we do. A big part of this process has been to ask our team what do they think, what do they want. The great news is that at this point, about 92% of our staff have already been fully vaccinated or had one jab, and 98% of our staff are expecting to be fully vaccinated by the time they come back to work. Importantly, more than 80% said that they expect their colleagues also to be fully vaccinated to feel that they can work in a safe environment as they start coming back. And I think that's really at the foundation for this policy and our stance going forward.
This won't just affect staff, it'll impact the community as well, community facilities. How will you enforce it?
Yes, well, we're working through all those details now. Our CEO is now operationalising this approach and this policy. It is important to note that all throughout the lockdowns we've had to adapt our services like library services to be able to provide those services online. Even maternal and childcare health we've been doing through Zoom meetings and online and telehealth. So we've already shown that we can be flexible and adapt, and this will be another example of creating safe spaces for people to visit. And where there need to be exceptions, Mike, well, that's what we'll be working through now so that we can make sure everybody that needs to access essential services can continue to do so.
Sally, Yarra Council is charging businesses to use parking spaces for outdoor dining. What stance are you taking?
Last night, Mike, we had a unanimous decision to waive all permit fees for outdoor dining until April next year, when we can reassess the economic situation. We've also waived all permit fees for our buskers because we want them to come back en masse when it's safe to do so. We've also gifting all of the parklet outdoor dining infrastructure to those hospitality businesses. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can to support those businesses into recovery and make sure that we're not adding any burden until our economy is up and we feel the full buzz of Melbourne back again.
Yeah, I can't wait. Can you also, before we let you go, tell us about your new cash incentives for those who get immunised at the Town Hall?
Yeah, so we've had a great program underway where we're doing spot prizes for people who are getting vaccinated, whether it's your first or second jab. Come on down to the Town Hall Vaccination Hub. But today we're up at the Royal Exhibition Buildings as well, just surprising random people who are doing the right thing for themselves, for the community and for our city by getting vaccinated. It's actually been the funnest thing I've done all day, Mike. It's been terrific.
It's good to see your smiling face. Sally Capp, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
A Latrobe Valley police officer is pleading for help as his 14-month-old son fights for his life in hospital. As Sonia Marinelli reports, the family needs a bigger car to help transport their son and equipment.
Shane Goldfinch and wife Alyssa are in a position every parent dreads. Their 14-month-old son Logan is battling neuroblastoma, a rare and dangerous form of cancer. He's facing 18 months of intensive chemotherapy to shrink the tumour on his adrenal gland. Doctors have given him a 50% chance of survival.
We never thought we'd be in a position like this, and I pray for nobody to ever be in this position.
The Goldfinch family live in Warrigal in Gippsland, where Dad Shane is an acting sergeant at the Latrobe Valley Police Station. It's a 2-hour round trip to Monash Hospital in Clayton, where Logan is undergoing his treatment. And the family car simply isn't big enough to accommodate the various equipment they need to transport. But within minutes of Shane going public with his family's plight on 3AW's Neil Mitchell program, he was inundated with offers of help. Car dealership 3 Point Motors stepping in to provide the family with a loan car for as long as they need.
It's that little extra help that makes it easier, makes him more comfortable, makes our our days a bit easier.
Charity TLC for Kids has been assisting families like the Goldfinches for more than 2 decades. They receive 3 to 4 requests a week from families with sick children needing practical items to help them get through the fight of their lives.
One of the important parts of any support for anybody is to know that they're not alone, they're not an island, and there's a lot of support in the community.
And now the family has their transport sorted, they can devote their full attention on their little superhero and on the long road ahead.
Up next, a warning to gardeners after a Melbourne man died from Legionnaires linked to potting mix, and why IVF treatments are being dramatically cut back in Melbourne. Stay with us here on 7 across Victoria. A bag of potting mix is being blamed for the death of a Preston man from Legionnaire's disease. As Jody Lee reports, his grieving family is warning others about the unexpected risk.
Well, Beppy Trenton's family is still coming to terms with his tragic loss. As they prepare to farewell the 79-year-old tomorrow, they're hoping to spread the message about the dangers of Legionnaire's disease.
I don't want anyone to go through what my family and I went through. It was unnecessary. My dad was actually still a very fit, 79-year-old, almost 80. He's just shy of his 80th birthday.
Beppy, a beloved Preston Crossing supervisor, unknowingly contracted Legionnaire's disease after opening a bag of potting mix in the garden. He never handled or touched the soil itself, but began showing symptoms 2 days later. He was eventually hospitalised almost a week later, but suffered toxic shock from kidney failure and tragically passed away.
It's horrible. I mean, to find out that such a common product could actually be so lethal.
Beppy's family now hope his death will serve as a warning to others to always wear a mask and gloves when handling potting mix.
IVF is being dramatically scaled back as the health system struggles under COVID pressure. As Sarah Jones reports, only people who have already commenced a cycle are allowed to continue their treatment.
Thousands of IVF patients are set to miss out on treatment due to elective surgery cutbacks. Emily Revere has been doing back-to-back cycles since March last year and says she simply can't afford to put her journey on hold.
We don't have the luxury of time.
The cutback means Number One Fertility, who operates out of the Epworth in Richmond, is now being forced to operate at just 50% capacity. That's about 200 patients each month at this clinic alone who will be impacted.
How do you actually choose that? That's going to be an impossible choice.
Fertility treatment is just one of many elective surgeries private hospitals have been forced to slash to stop the strain on frontline health workers as hospitals face mounting challenges with the expected surge in coronavirus patients. The Burnett Institute's modelling predicts there will be more than 2,500 Victorians in hospital with coronavirus by the end of the year.
We're seeing an extraordinary increase in work as a result of unvaccinated patients needing admission to a metropolitan hospital.
Patients who have already started an IVF cycle this month will still be able to go ahead with the procedure and won't be impacted by the 50% cap.
Pop icon Kylie Minogue could be coming home to Australia. British tabloids report the 53-year-old is planning to relocate here to spend more time with her family after living in the UK for 3 decades. During her career over there, the singer has rubbed shoulders with music royalty and the royal family. She's expected to live here in Melbourne, but it's unclear if Minogue's partner, magazine executive Paul Solomons, will join her. Let's take a quick look at Melbourne's roads right now.
Good afternoon, I'm Jess Miller in the Sweeney Estate Agents traffic chopper, where we're hearing of a crash causing delays on the Monash Freeway outbound near Wellington Road. Having a look at it now though, you can see no incidents, no accidents, but just ramp metering and apparently a lot of traffic trying to move onto the Monash from Wellington Road. Sweeney Estate Agents are experts in the West with 14 offices and over 35 years experience. Think real estate, think Sweeney. SweeneyEA.com.au. Have a fabulous evening. Catch you tomorrow.
Time for an update on the weather with Jane Bunn. And Jane, cloud has arrived after our sunny day.
Mike, that is a sign of rain on the way, but if you're in Melbourne, you may not even notice it. It'll fall only overnight. In the bright sunshine, our cold start quickly warmed up, reaching a top of 22. Cloud arrived mid-afternoon, but it'll stay dry until at least curfew. Head out for a walk, it is remaining quite warm. Rain begins close to midnight. Bright sunshine is warming Victoria ahead of clouds spreading through. So far, there is rain in the southwest that is barely reaching the ground. It is 16 down in Portland, while it's 27 in Mildura. The pleasant weather came from a high moving through, but our next weather system is a trough and cold front with a weak link up to the tropics. It won't last long. The next high moves in later tomorrow. So rain should reach the ground over the southwest tonight, spreading across Melbourne overnight, western Gippsland early tomorrow. There's not much for the north or east Gippsland. It's all dry by later in the day. This timing is great for Melbourne. The rain falls around midnight and it clears by dawn. Then it's dry during the day tomorrow and on Friday and Saturday too. So we'll have 4 days in a row with no wet weather. And it's warm again on Friday and Saturday. The next weather system arrives later Saturday. Rain reaching more parts of the state, followed by widespread showers in the south and alpine snow. So we're back to chilly conditions once again by Sunday. Around the nation tomorrow, Sydney jumps up to 30 in the sunshine before a gusty cool change around 6 p.m. Sunshine continues in Canberra, while Hobart, rain overnight like us, the odd shower in the morning, then sunshine. Adelaide, dry but cool. To Victoria, by dawn, the rain is only over Gippsland and it clears during the morning. There's areas of cloud across the southwestern half of the state, but dry underneath. The northeastern half, it does remain sunny. It is cool out there in moderate westerly winds. So in Melbourne, it is just 16 tomorrow, but dry all through the day. Mostly sunny in the morning, mostly cloudy in the afternoon, Mike.
OK, thanks, Jane. And that's all from the 7 Newsroom for now. Peter Mitchell's here at 6. From the 7 News team, have a great afternoon.